Hello, Patricia O'Connor and Frida Reba Darcy here, like right here. You're supposed to be on this side of camera, not behind camera. She's evidently happier behind camera today. Today I thought that we would talk about a great tree if you're just getting into bonsai, or just all around. This is a great tree. This is my Cork Bark Oak and my Quercus. And this guy, they are a European, here you go. They are a European species, and it gets its name, well, you know, there's a lot of reasons. There's several different trees that have cork bark in their name. I have I'm lucky enough to have a cork bark black pine. I've also heard of cork bark, I think elms, maybe cork bark maples. I believe somebody was talking about some sort of juniper that has some sort of cork bark to it, and there are other pines that can have cork bark as well, and with those it's usually a mutation of some sort, and a lot of times they're not exactly sure how that happens. It's a 1 in 1,000 kind of thing, and you can't propagate cork bark like pines, for instance, but you can take scions from them, or you can graft from them and graft that onto other trees. Just a little FYI. But that is not why we call a cork bark oak a cork bark, although we could. Its texture is, I mean, this thing is massive, and the texture to this trunk, it just almost looks like a stone, and it is so solid. It is so solid. It's, you know, so there are a lot of reasons why you might have cork bark come to mind, but the main real reason is this is what they harvest. They actually can peel these things, like you've seen people shear sheep, where they roll that, they can do these the same way. They make a cut on them somehow, and they can roll that cork bark off, and they will come through with a punch and punch one corks out of this guy, a cork bark oak. I believe they might be from Spain, and they're evergreens. They are drought resistant, tolerant. They're drought tolerant. They hold up well in drought, and they this cork bark that you see is their way of fending themselves off against fire. You could have fire just sweep through the fields in the fall that are dry and everything, and just absolutely take every limb off of a cork bark oak, and it'll just kind of hide out underneath that thick layer of bark until spring comes around, and then boom, they come out again. They love to be fed, and they respond well. They respond well to regular watering. Although when I got this tree, it was during the start of COVID, and I gotta say, for me, lockdown kind of resulted in my coming back to bonsai. I had probably just been on the move for most of my life, and it was just kind of the way I operated. And somewhere as a teenager, I got too busy to go out in the woods in southeast Texas and dig up random trees and bring them home and put them in pots. I just started, I just kind of took off there for a few dozen years. And it was only recently, a couple of years ago, when things slowed down, I was like, hey, whatever happened to that hobby you had as a kid that you used to love so much with the bonsai trees? And because of COVID, but I bet there's a lot more of you out there who have are artists or have rediscovered some passion that you had a long time ago with the time that you've had on your hands due to the lockdown. And I got back into bonsai in a big way. I had stayed close to plants most of my life. I had grown different things, but nothing I thought was as really as elegant or as artful as bonsai. And to that end, there are some trees that are absolutely a little bit challenging. And what I would say is probably the best, the one thing that you need. You don't have to be really top 5 in anything, but the one thing you do kind of need to be, even if that is despite yourself, is consistent. You can't have a bad week and decide just not to go out and check on your trees. You can't have a bad day and just decide not to go check on your trees. Regardless of when things are going great, go out there and check on your trees and check on them on a hot day a couple of times a day. Smaller plants, smaller trees on a hot day, check on those a couple of times a day. But when things aren't going well either, you need to still be there for those guys. Consistency. That's the one thing that you can't really do without. That will deplete the number of trees you have over time. Inconsistency will cause you to drop a number here, or drop a number there, miss a water here, miss a feeding there, miss an infestation when it could be cut off in the. But anyway, so yeah, consistency. That's Pat's tip for. And not everybody has that as a trait. So that doesn't mean you can't do bonsai. You just need, like I always am talking about, you just need to know yourself and go, yeah, on this I'm going to have to buckle down and be really consistent. So with that in, you can probably live to fight another day if you have a Cork Bark Oak. It will tolerate a few of your misgivings. The guys I got this tree from, I believe they were very much on their game, but they were doing a practice where I believe they were probably watering it less. And the reason I say that is I have heard some experts say that if you want the leaves to get smaller, that you can water less frequently. And when I got this tree, it was covered in very much smaller than this in the way of leaves. It had tiny little leaves. Now, on the last video, I had talked about some pruning work that I was anticipating doing to this tree. And I wasn't sure if you could see it because I hadn't really thought about it before I made the video, so I hadn't really checked the angle to see if that was in the picture. But in this video, you can. What I clipped was right here, and it just went absolutely straight up. Now, every time I clip something on this tree, it tends to come back 3 or 4 fold. It would like to be prolific in that way. And in that way, you probably won't find yourself hung out to dry when it comes to options. If you need a branch, you'll probably get one if you just wait a minute. So you will also get little shoots everywhere. And as you can see, I've already probably cut this back once or twice for you already. And every time I do, it comes back 2 or 3 fold. What I didn't show you the other day, but was trying to describe to you, was I had a shoot longer than this sticking straight up. And I had originally thought that if I wire it, I can bend it down in kind of a rainbow shape, but that would be the apex of the tree getting bent in a rainbow. And I decided, yeah, that's bull. We know darn good and well that every time we clip a branch, it tends to send out 4 shoots right there. So if we get 2 or 1 or 2 that we like going the direction that we want it to go, that to me would be better than making a rainbow bend out of the top branch coming out of the top of this oak tree. But my, what a really nice tree. This was my first feeling like I had actually done it. If you're going to start bonsai, don't spend a ton of money on trees going in. Start with nursery stock. Start with, you know, some other things, maybe some things that you have around in planters or stuff. You might want to see if you can bonsai those. But like somebody else who was really on their game told me, then get one nice tree so that you have something to maintain and be proud of while you're trying to bring those other things along. And slowly, or not even slowly, but surely, almost very quickly, you'll find that your attitude towards both trees kind of meets in the middle, and you have a healthy respect for the work that had gone on the one that you had gone on before you, as well as you have a healthy respect for what's ahead of you with what it is you're making. And to that end, I would like to say that you can have a really, really, really fun and nice tree with a cork bark oak early on, because as you can see, this thing has not got ramification all to be darned. In fact, there's probably still a few elbows I need to take care of, and there are still a few branches I need to prune back, and everything that is on here right now is probably a few years away from forking off and then clipped back and then forking off, vibrating as many times as we need to do to fill in all of these areas and make them look really showy. But hey, in the meantime, I get this base. I get all of this really good texture and all this. Everybody who sees this tree is like, wow, I like what it, you know. And it's like, yeah, that's my Quercus. That's my Cork Bark Oak. So if you, the other day I had done a video and I was saying that if you're new to bonsai, bald cypress is a really great tree to start with. And to that end, Dawn redwoods are too. Just don't mess with them as many times as I messed with mine. If you go to Bruxelles and buy a box tree. So other than that, I just wanted to add to that. To that end, the Cork Bark Oak was probably my introduction to something that I was really thought was impressive, just because of what it was, not because of its state of refinement. When I got it, it looked to me like it had maybe been on the back bench, and maybe that they had had a hard time during COVID. So I got it knowing that I had to, that I was going to learn about restructuring leaves and restructuring branches and branch placement. And so what I thought I would do early on was try to hang on to some of the heavier, older limbs, even though they weren't in the best shape. I didn't want to give those up. But then I started letting the new branches come out and shape them the way that I wanted to. And we had an episode here last year with some dieback, and that gave me an opportunity to reevaluate and look at what I'd learned and go, this is a great opportunity to clean this tree up and start over with some fresh new lines. And so at this point, I'm going on my third year with this tree, and one thing that hasn't been a problem is keeping it. You feed it a little, you water it a little, and it will just give right back with plenty of choices. When it comes time to cut back a branch, you can go back to a leaf, and whatever leaf you cut it back to, the next branch will typically grow in that direction. When you cut a branch off, I would generally leave a tiny little space for some dieback. Don't ever cut anything off without there being a node present, or you may just cut off that avenue of growth altogether. Nothing may come back from there. It'll just cork over or whatever, but you'll have to stop. So other than that, they're really, really forgiving. They're evergreens. So it may lose or shed a few leaves in the winter when it slows down, but it probably won't all, so it'll be green all year long. You'll have something, if you have one of these, you'll have something nice and green to look at. And other than that, they're just wonderful trees. They're extremely hardy, they're extremely tolerant, and forgiving of amateur mistakes, I'd say, for the most part, but don't tax their energy just because they have some. That's my new soapbox I'm just going to constantly jump on. And I have had, as an amateur, I have had a little bit of hard luck with some branches. I didn't think that I had broke them, but then a few days later, you start seeing all of the leaves on them curl up, and you go, "Yep, I probably torqued that layer out in that, or that fiber, a little more than I thought." And on one of them, I had watched the limb do what I thought was absolutely fine to do, but farther back, when the wire dug in, I believe it pulled the branch harder, which kind of shoehorned against it. I don't know. I might have done that, but it could also be that it could also, I'm cutting this off flush because I don't want it to come back, but it could also be that sometimes wire digs into these guys, and as the limb tries to elongate with a piece of wire wrapped around it and dug in, it'll leverage against itself like a fulcrum and tear the dang limb loose, especially if you've already taken it to the limit on your bend and maybe heard a little crack and decided that was absolutely where you should back off. So I did have that happen. Other than that, it's been a good tree to learn wiring on, and I'm not gonna say this like I'm an old expert. I'm gonna say this like sit back and watch and let's see how it works out. Last year, I put wire on this very early, and then I would pull it off before it would bite into the branches because I didn't want to leave marks, and then the limbs would straighten out. Okay, so then I would back the wire off and then put it in different tracks and then try to keep the limb, and it would just outgrow the wire and then straighten out. So this year, I on a tip I heard from somebody else, I've decided that it's cork bark, and we're going to treat it like a pine a little, and let the wire stay set long enough for the bends that I'm making in the branches to stay bent. Wiring a branch, bending a branch, being so worried about the wire digging in that you keep removing the wire and fighting that shape that you're trying to get in it, and it ultimately wins. Well, good. I guess you didn't scar the. But I'm actually, the other thought going the other way is that it is a cork bark, so those little that slight dig in that happens may work in your favor later on when it makes bark over that. So if that's a messed up train of thought, I'll keep you posted on it. But other than that, I think everything else I've said I've learned from that last little bit about digging in. Somebody else mentioned that, but I want to try that on my own before I say that's tried and true. Everything else I've learned from other people, doing countless hours in the middle of the night, doing bonsai porn, and learning about my cork bark oak. And there are some really beautiful cork bark oaks out there. If you're one of those people who thinks that perhaps you might want to get into wood carving, Graham Potter has some interesting videos where he just really enjoys just carving one of and the wood texture and the color in the wood and all that really just, it comes really rich, and it just totally changes the game on these guys. So if you wanted to do a hollow feature or something, they would lend themselves well to that. In the time that I've had this tree, it looks to me like it may have had a hollow feature here and here, or that might be just I've got more to learn about how this cork rolls and splits. But when you stare at it long enough, you do see that it sort of forms in the same way that rings do. tree is really hardy against heat, like bring it on, as long as you don't let it go without water and kill it that way. But it can probably stand, it's probably more tolerant than that than some other trees. But other than that, when other trees are wilting or saying uncle because it's a hot day, the cork bark you'll see it almost grow in front of you. So that's my little, can't say enough nice things about the 2 years now that I've had this cork bark oak, and I would recommend this guy to a beginner. They're very forgiving. They like full sun, so if you have one of these, you have to put them in at least 4 hours, you know, longer than that preferably, but at least 4 hours of full sun, and or maybe light them if that's going to be an issue. But I would not mess around with lighting. I would make sure I had something to really put to them if I were going to do that. Remember, they come from probably a more equatorial part of the world. So yeah, they if you fertilize these guys, I think the leaves will get bigger, and it will get more prolific, and it will grow fast. And if you water it instead of just like holding back the water, I think there was, and I keep saying hold back the water because in my studies I did read a lot of old school people too, and they were using a lack of water as a way to train. I'm just not a big fan of that. It did give them smaller leaves, but you have to really be on your game, and you can't have any problems. Like the last guys who did this were probably on their game better than I was, so they probably held back on the watering to make the leaves tinier, and then all of a sudden we got COVID and their help was all gone. So a month later, Patricia comes along and says, all of these limbs are dead. How much for the cork bark oak? And we've been running around together ever since. But it took me a year to kind of figure out what I wanted to do with this. And by the way, I believe it is facing us. When I got this tree, I looked at it and kind of did the rotate around, and when it really doesn't have a bad side. And that's what I would have said about most of the trees I got at the time, because I didn't know any better. But also, it really doesn't have a bad side. It's got a great side, which is this one. The opposite side is slightly more dynamic, but the trunk kind of does a bow this way. So I've always called this the front, but this depth in the back, well, yeah, I guess so, yeah. And this branch, although it's going to get styled and stuff, it is technically, my thoughts, it is technically probably too low, because we're not supposed to have something down the first third. Let's see, we could call, yeah, that's right on the cusp. But the reason I allowed this guy to go out, because I like it when it came out, and also the trunk to me kind of does a roll this way and then a roll back. So we don't, if I don't go with this, then I don't have a lower branch until over here. And I have pruned branches from this spot before, and to be honest, the 2 other times that I pruned branches from this spot, I felt the space was lacking. I was going, yeah, no, I just made a bald spot there. I think that I was like looking at my first third rule and calling that kind of out of bounds. But then once I move it, I go, well, it was right on the cusp, and the trunk moved out this way. So if you were over here, you'd be further down and in the pit. So that's why this is here. And I kind of think I'm probably going to keep it, but it will grow. This wire will grow probably more like that, and then do another one of these and come back. I'm really big on the take it take it over and back. I'll take a branch, I'll bend it around one finger, bring that finger down with the wire, and then bend it around the other finger, and then bring that finger down to support the wire, and then bend it around the other finger. That's what I keep finding myself doing with this tree. And when I'm not breaking stuff, that seems to be what I'm doing to have better luck. So yeah, that's got us caught up. The only other thing that I said I would show you that will probably be a little awkward for me to throw into the frame was in the last video I was talking about my trident maple and what I might have to do to try to get some motion in that trunk wherever it's slanted and goes up into three. I'd like to get more of a swoop by using a new branch coming out here and then maybe carving off on the top. I did bend that down like I said, and when I'm up and mobile, it's coming out of it's currently, you can see that tree sticking out of the back of my head like I'm a unicorn. I'm a unicorn. And, but not high enough to see the branch, I think. But not high enough, I don't think, to see the branch that I wired. But it does. It has a guy wire now, pulling that branch down to where from the base of the tree, the trunk goes up to the trunk. We make a slanted trunk, and then we hit that line and come back down because I've tied a guy wire to it and pulled it. It's a young branch, so it doesn't really lend itself to that shape yet. But if it gets some girth to it, or as I overly said in the last video, it's substantial, that will be a line that will follow. You'll just, like, your eye will just come out of the ground, come up from the nabari, and just go, your eye will just go right up that short trunk run and then roll back on that first limb. I think that'll probably be a much flattering line. The cuts that are on there now are probably 2 or 3 years old, but I don't like where they are. So that is in effect what I would be losing, plus that several years of ramification that's already started. It's not the best, and some of it I haven't improved either. But yeah, as we learn, we get better, but I already see something that I probably shouldn't allow to get longer and thicker before I start dealing with it. At some point, I'm going to want to deal with those 3 trunks and their lack of movement for so long, just being a straight shot. And that's the last I'm going to go on about the trident maple without being able to show you the trident maple. So yeah, like and subscribe. It's a really fall day today. It's cool, it's air, it's cloudy out and breezy. And I never really see it rain, but the sidewalks are all wet where it is constantly doing that. So it's finally starting to act a little bit like fall. And that can only mean one thing, that it's going to be 90 degrees again tomorrow. No, we might be into fall for a minute. But this guy could use that if they don't get a winter. When winters are short, they don't really shut off much. It needs a few cold days to even have a winter. So that would be good for you to take a little break for a minute. Just rest your little oak head there. So yeah, that's me. And when you repot one of these, if you repot one of these, never completely strip the roots of everything. Leave something in the ball behind for it to live off of. And I would do that probably just before they start to send out shoots, which is in the spring. Here, that's probably February. But I said the other day I probably wouldn't get to work on that maple until February. That's not accurate. It needs when our winters stay warm like that, it gives us a shorter window to work on maples. So I was being a little sarcastic when I said February. Usually by February things are starting to bud out again. So yeah, anyway, like and subscribe, and I appreciate you and thank you for watching, and yeah, enjoy this Friday. We made it. We made it to live to survive another weekend. And yeah, that's Patricia hanging out with her Cork Bark Oak.